Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven. Today our special guest is D.G. Valdron. D.G. is a wayward Maritimer and denizen of the Canadian prairie. Growing up, he spent his youth working at the drive-in theater and was raised on a steady diet of B-movies and pop culture. Valdron has had the unusual assortment of quirky writer's jobs: mechanic, carpenter, bricklayer, projectionist, cook, waiter, woodcutter, ditch digger, journalist, schoolteacher, and for many years now, he's been a lawyer specializing in the field of aboriginal rights. A lifelong and prolific writer, he's published his first short story at the age of 13. Since then, there has been numerous short story and nonfiction publications in markets from all over the world, notably in Interzone, Parsec, On-Spec, After Dark, and Terminal Fright. So welcome.
Oh, well, it's good to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, now you're a lawyer, so I wanted to pick your brain a little bit, because I know a lot of us are writers that listen to this podcast. Now, is it true as soon as we write it, we have the copyright, or do we have to apply? Because I remember the early days when I was writing, I remember reading some authors would file for copyright and they would pay all this money, and I wasn't sure if that was the right way to do it or not.
Yeah, well, copyright has a lot of history, but to give you the basics, right now, because of international conventions and because of statute law, copyright comes to you automatically the minute you create something. Copyright doesn't apply to ideas, but the minute that you write an idea down, you have copyright in it. And that is applicable worldwide. Now, in Canada, the United States, there are registration systems. And there's some history to that. Back in the day, the United States was, the big center for, intellectual piracy. It's China now, but back in the day, when everyone else was coming up with, universally agreed copyright laws, the United States decided to go with a registration system so that they could basically steal other people's work. But over the years, and that's why in the States you have so many odd things that ended up in public domain. But over the years, the United States has come into line with the rest of the country, or with the rest of the world. It still retains a vestigial copyright registration system, so does Canada, but you don't really need it. It'll give you some rights or some additional rights, but not that significant. What counts for you is basically the act of creation. If you have an idea, if you create something and you put it into a fixed form, then you have that copyright, and that's automatic and it's respected worldwide.
Now, I was on the Kindle or KDP publishing community forum, and someone claimed that somebody basically copied their entire book and started selling it on Amazon. Like they already had it up on Amazon, and then Amazon apparently contacted them and said, this person claims copyright, and unless you filed a lawsuit, you have to take yours down. Like I don't know if that's happening more, and like is that a story you've heard before? Or?
Yeah, I've been hearing about that kind of thing. This is a real problem because it is now so easy to copy people's work. I mean, back 200, 300 years ago, before the invention of movable type, nobody worried about copyright because if you wanted to copy a book,
Yeah.
well, you just had to sit there or pay somebody to sit there for like 2 years and
Yeah.
and then movable type came along, and anybody with a printing press could basically steal somebody else's work. And that's when copyright begins to evolve as an actual right. And by the way, here's what copyright means. It's the right to make copies. That's it. Lawyers believe in technical language, but somehow we missed out on that one. So it's simply, any kind of copyright is simply the right to make a copy of some kind. And that can include running through a photocopier, scanning it, making a movie, a play, an interpretive dance review out of something, setting it to music and making it a song, or translating it into another language. Anytime you are basically taking an artistic work or a literary work and you were making a copy of that work in some way, even if it is interpreting this in a new medium, that's making copies. Anyway, so what we've done now is we've moved into this era where violating copyright or purloining it, stealing it, is now incredibly easy. All somebody has to do now is they don't even have to scan it anymore. All they have to do is basically get the electronic file, um, take your name off, stick their name on, and voila, they've stolen your work. And sometimes, for a lot of these online pirate sites, they don't even bother taking your name off. They just, you know, steal your book, put it up for free, or basically sell it as their own. Um, it's a problem. It's an issue, especially for groups and people like Amazon, and especially it's a problem that we're having with pirate sites and illegal downloads. And I don't think there's an easy answer right now.
Yeah, I'm thinking how you can't really stop it. It's like once you put your work out there, it's sort of out of your control. I had an author ask me, if I could help them with publishing a book, but then they said, can you, not, how do you say, put some sort of protection on it so no one can copy it, etc. But I said that's really hard to do. So,
Yeah, I've heard of things like that, like watermarking and things. I don't know how successful that is. No matter what we do, there's going to be a whole bunch of little tech nerds who are trying to figure their way past things like watermarking or restrictions and stuff like that. Um, I mean, and I suppose getting back to the registration system, if you register your copyright, you do have some form of legal proof that you're the real owner. Amazon will ask for that. Um, and if you register, you will have some opportunity or some potential right to go for extra damages and so forth. Neither of these things are ultimately vital or essential. There are a number of ways to prove that the copyright is yours simply by asserting or simply by providing evidence. Um, and in terms of the remedy for damages, well, if you're trying to sue somebody in Nigeria, good luck, no matter what you do. Um, you'll spend $100,000 on a lawsuit for $20 reward. That's part of the problem we're facing with this kind of thing.
okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Like a lot of authors, if they finally do find a publishing house, they're given this
Mhm.
contract. Like, what sort of pitfalls do you think they should look out for, or what's a good contract to have with a publisher?
Okay, first priority these days is a good contract is one that's got some kind of expiration date or escape clause. Uh, Nowadays, the field of publishing is changing so quickly. The terms and circumstances for publishers and writers are changing and evolving. And most importantly, for a lot of small publishers, and no disrespect at all, I'm a small publisher myself, uh, the they come and go. Um, and if you were signing away a contract with the publisher for open-ended rights, you may end up just tying yourself in knots legally where you don't have the rights to your work, but nobody's actually doing it. I would end up talking to people who had to spend years just trying to get their audio rights back or various kinds of rights. I had a case where I helped somebody get their rights back from a zombie publisher that had gone out of business, but their books were still on Amazon. So somebody was making money on their books, but we had to claw that back. Your contract should always contain some provision for termination, either expiration after a certain period of time, or expiration upon notice, or automatic expiration upon dissolution. It used to be that these kinds of things went that book publishing uh, rights would expire and revert back once the book was out of print. This is back when there were real publishing houses and they had printing presses and all that. They still have all of that stuff. But now we're in an environment where, a publisher could release like an ebook once a year or a POD book once every few years and keep things under indefinitely. And while it doesn't do them any good to have your book, covered indefinitely, well, it becomes part of their catalog. Maybe, they'll get a lottery ticket win on that book someday. You never know. But for you, as a writer, if your book is being hung up and nobody's doing anything with it, that's kind of like a kick in the head. You don't want that. The other things that you want in terms of your contract after, your escape clause, you really need to know, and you really need to focus on what rights you are giving up and how far. You're not technically giving up rights, you are giving them a license to rights. You're giving them permission to print your book. Well, think about that. If the publisher you're dealing with has no audiobook line, has no background in audiobooks, has no experience in audiobooks, then even if you give them audiobook rights, it's worthless to you. They'll never do an audiobook. At the same time, you've had a material loss. You might have been able to sell your audiobook rights somewhere else. If your publisher has contacts in Hollywood and can market your stuff down there, then, for books or movie rights, then yeah, sure, that makes sense to give that to them. If they don't have any of those connections or contacts, then basically they're cutting themselves in. They're dealing themselves a lottery ticket, but they're not going to be able to do anything for you. International rights, if they don't have any international connections, again, giving them international rights is just the right that now you're no longer able to sell yourself. Maybe you're not able to yourself market audiobooks or international or other forms like movies and television. But at least if you retain those rights, you have the option to sell, and you actually have the control over it. So that's something that you should be careful of. And also, and I cannot stress this enough, never sign or never accept a contract clause that says something along the lines of, yes, and we will grant you, or I will give the publisher rights to, or a license to new and unknown technologies not discovered yet, blah, 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 or new forms of media, etc. Okay, number one, you don't know what those are. How can you give them up? Number two, even if they emerge later on, you don't know what the standards are going to be. You don't know what the value is going to be. You don't know what the royalties should be. I mean, the royalty situation, for instance, for ebooks and for print books is very different. The royalty situation for audiobooks is very different. Your royalties are calculated differently each time out. The rewards you might get for movie and television rights are going to be different. You can't predict what rewards or royalties are going to be for a new or unknown technology. And if you can't predict that, then you may get trapped. So you want to watch out for that. You want to be as specific as possible in terms of the rights that you are granting under a license, and you want to be focused. I've seen publishing contracts where it simply says, we're giving you the rights to do this ebook for 2 years and a print book right for 1,000 copies. Okay, that works. That's very specific. Other times it's for a period of time. And most of the time that you're dealing with the publisher, they are going to just really be interested in the rights that they need to do the things that they want to do. All of the extra rights that they may ask for, that's just a lottery ticket that, they're hoping might pay off. Maybe you want to give them a lottery ticket. But if they have no experience there, if they have no interest in that area, if they have no ability to procure in that area, you're giving stuff to them that they're not really going to use, and you're giving them control to them that they may not use in your best interest. And you're giving them stuff that now you could have maybe used yourself and maybe found an advantage. So that's the other big thing. And of course, the final thing um, on any publishing contract, any assignment of copyright, is getting paid. So you want to spend a lot of attention, a lot of time looking at your royalties, your royalty rate. You want to determine if there is an advance and how long it'll take to pay out that advance. You want to really make sure that you are getting reports, quarterly reports, annual reports, but at some point they have to give you a document that says this is what we sold. If there's no reporting requirement, then you're up the creek. Even if there is a reporting requirement, they may not follow through on it, but at least now you've got something to hold them to the wall, something to demand. And if it has to go to court, even a small claims court, you got something.
Now, if a publisher goes out of business, do the rights revert automatically?
Not necessarily. Like I said, I had that problem with the zombie publisher. There's two problems that you have. One is that if a publisher goes out of business and they're working through Amazon and Ingram Spark and all of these other entities, Draft Digital, Google Smashwords, the books may end up still out there on all of these platforms. The publisher is gone, but the books are out there. There's still an account. It's presumably being paid into a bank account, or even if it's not paid into a bank account, the money's piling up someplace. There are sales, and you'll never see any of that. So this is the thing that I had with the zombie publisher. We actually had to go to Amazon and say, no more contract with these guys, rights terminated, take them down so we can put them up ourselves. With respect to a publisher, technically that goes out of business. They can go out of business in any number of ways. They can go bankrupt. If they go bankrupt, a trustee in bankruptcy gets control of all their assets. Those assets will include intellectual property. So if a publisher goes out of business by way of bankruptcy, the trustee in bankruptcy gets the contracts, administers the contracts, and any rights that are in the contracts are held by the trustee, who presumably can sell them to anybody else. So a publisher could go bankrupt, and say Disney could buy all those assets, and suddenly you're stuck dealing with Disney, even if you didn't want to. Or, and because Disney is not in the business of buying up, dead publishers' assets, it could wind up in the hands of some joker who really doesn't understand or know what he's doing, who could be completely unreasonable or do absolutely nothing with it. So that's volatile. Sometimes a publisher will simply wind down, close operations. Does the contract get transferred? Does the contract get assigned? Is there anything in the contract to say what happens? I would say, you should have a provision in your contract. If the publisher goes out of business, shuts down, blah, 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 bankruptcy, anything like that, rights revert automatically. Because if not, you get into this confused, uncertain situation where you don't know who's got the rights or where the rights go. And you know what? That is really bad for you, because what happens is that if you have your book, you take it to another publisher, they'll go, so is the rights situation pretty clear, obvious? You absolutely have those rights? If you're going, well, maybe we mostly have it, it's kind of complicated, they'll go, I don't need complications. Go down the street. Mm-hmm. You see this especially with the higher levels, like agents, the major publishers. If you're dealing with film or television, there's an entire legal community in film and television whose job is simply to make sure that the rights situation is completely clear, nailed down. There's chains of title for everything. And by the way, there's also an insurance industry that's built on the backs of the lawyers, just in case they miss something. Because a film or television production may end up tens of millions of dollars. You don't want to be sued at the last minute because there's a defect in your legal rights, and now you have a movie that you can't exhibit. That's like a universal nightmare. On a smaller scale, that's something that'll happen with any professional publisher. They need to know the right situation is clear before they'll deal with you. And there's a lot of writers out there who have had really bad experiences with writing, with their publishing. Simply when a publisher gets in trouble, goes up or down issues and stuff like that. You want to be clear. I was lucky. I was dealing with a small press myself. Once they decided to go to business, they did the right thing, and they basically returned all the rights. So that freed me. Um, but for a lot of people, I mean, publishing can be a labor of love. And if you get sick, if you burn out, you have a meltdown, any number of things can happen that'll just upset a life and leave everything in a lurch. I'm sure there's a story out there where there was this honorable, decent man or woman, and they were running their one-person publishing house, and everybody loved them because they were so wonderful. And then they had a stroke, and the family had no idea what to do with anything. And now everybody's rights have been screwed around for like 15 years. It can happen.
Yeah. Now, you're also a writer as well. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've been writing since 13, so I guess, that's one of the things you started off with in childhood. I mean, has being a lawyer really helped your writing career?
Well, you kind of get a perspective on humans. If you're doing this job, you see a lot of people in vulnerable situations. You get to meet a lot of different characters. But I think in that sense, everybody who engages with the world gets to meet people and know people. And certainly my advice to any writer is to just get out into the world, meet people, talk to people, get to know. Um, I generally try and keep these portions of my life separate. So I do not write legal thrillers. Oh man, would that be terrible or what? It would be it would be like, writing about the inside of my refrigerator. No, I write to go someplace else and be someplace else. Writing a legal thriller would be like it would be like a bargain with Satan. You get the thing that you've loved, but you get it in a way that sucks all the joy and fun out of it. Um, but I think that it's the crossover between writing and the crossover between being a lawyer is that in both, I have to be observant and passionate and clever. I have to listen carefully and speak clearly. So there you go.
So DG, you're going to do a reading for us. Now, can you tell us a bit of context of what you're reading, and then you can start reading.
Okay, the story is called Black Rainbow. It's only about 1,000 words, so it should fit in. It's part of the Echelon project, although it may be an unpublished part of it. Uh, I've got a book coming out on November the 26th. It's called Twilight of Echelon, and it's a collaboration between myself, an artist named Robert Pasternak, and 3 other writers. Robert Pasternak is this very groovy, very funky artist who does a lot of exotic sci-fi themes. And he did a series of paintings or plates about a trippy kind of Art Deco sci-fi world that he called Twilight of Echelon. He went to a publisher. The publisher got a series of writers together, and the rules were we couldn't talk to each other. We couldn't talk to the artist. We could not go by the titles of the paintings. We could not go by the sequence. We were just given a bunch of paintings and they said, write anything you want. Write as much as you want, write as little as you want, make it anything at all. So it's just every single one of us was flying blind. I went wild with it. I wrote about 40,000 words and 29 stories. Um, and I think I'll have about 4 or 5 stories published in it. But it was just a fun thing because you were getting these pictures and said, tell us a story, make a story out of each one of them. So that was the Echelon project. And I love doing it. I would love to do it again. And I'm quite proud of it. Anyway, so shall I just jump right in?
Sure.
Okay, Black Rainbow. Transcript, follow-up interview, Hanrahan Lopez, Echelon, long-range scout, 4th class. Case officer, senior investigator Michael Ortiz, and monitor Montague Wen. Case name, Rainbow Incident. Tell us about the rainbow. I'm not sure that's the right word for it. Do you remember rainbows on Earth? Yes, no. They're arches. They're not solid. They're products of light reflecting through moisture, breaking up the spectrum into bands. Red, blue, yellow, green. You see it in the sky after a rainfall. I've never heard of that. And we all know what rainbows are. Continue with your report. You saw a rainbow. It wasn't a rainbow, of course. It wasn't an arch in the distance. Maybe it was an arch. It extended all the way into the sky. We couldn't see how far, but we were at the base of the rainbow. It was curvy and waving in and out. There's no color on Echelon, not the way we understand color. But the rainbow, the pillar, was divided into bands, almost like color. We haven't seen that before on Echelon. Yeah, no, it wasn't normal. The robots? The cone things. You mean the Yith. Proper term is indigents. Yeah, whatever they're called. They were all over the place. They were stirred up, excited. There were information bubbles racing all over the place. I had the impression they were frantic. They were upset. This wasn't their doing. No, I didn't have that impression at all. No, we're not interested in your impressions. Stick to the observations. This was something else, something with one of the robots. I mean, the indigent, something with an indigent. What about it? I think it was dead. Stationary? No, not stationary. I've seen them stationary. Some of them go days without moving, months, even years, I suppose. But this wasn't that. Even when they're stationary, there's something about them, an awareness, maybe a signal, a pulse. Impressions again. This one, there was nothing. I got nothing off it. I just knew it was dead. The other indigents knew it too. They were careful around it, like they didn't want to be near it. They didn't want to touch it. We dropped an atom bomb on one of those things once. It didn't even scratch it. But you say this one was dead. Yes. You're sure? Yes. And there was something else. Yes. The dead one. It was infected. Infested, something. There were vines growing up through it and these big flat leaves like a plant. Yeah, but I don't think it was a plant. I think it was from on the other side of the rainbow. It was different, as if space was different on the other side, that the world, the reality on the other side of the rainbow, there was something else. It wasn't Echelon over there. And that's why the indigents were so frantic. I think the vine thing came from the other side of the rainbow. I think it was like us. Like us? What do you mean? I think it was an invasion and an incursion from somewhere else, another reality, pressing in and invading. I said like us, but it wasn't like us. We punched through pinholes in our little ships. They don't mind us. This thing, whoever they were bringing their entire reality, their dimension here. They made this rainbow, and their world was on the other side of it. The indigents, they don't notice us, but it killed one of them. It scared them. You say you came back later, there was nothing. Yeah, that's right. No rainbow, no dead indigents, no frantic activity. It was all back to normal. Okay, thank you for your report. One more thing. This is subjective, but I want to mention it. We try to observe, verify what we can observe. I know you don't like subjective impressions. Yeah, well, that hasn't stopped you from giving them. Okay, well, here goes. The indigents were fighting. I have that impression, but they weren't winning. Not until the vine thing was distracted. That's when it turned. That's when the indigents got control. All right. Do you have anything to support that? Just feelings. Yeah, impressions, worthless. Go on. You say the vine thing was distracted. You could sense that how? I don't know. It was like an awareness. I felt its distraction, its attention. What distracted it? I did. Did you do anything? No, I was just there. I didn't understand what I was saying. I didn't understand what it was. And then suddenly I felt this change. It was this claustrophobic sense and frantic and weird, but then something changed. Whatever that vine thing infesting the dead indigene was, it noticed me. It knew I didn't belong. There was a sense of understanding. It was very interested. Interested? Not the right word. Hungry. But that's not right either. Let's just say that suddenly it became aware of me and was interested in the fact that I belonged to some other place, not in a good way. Not for us if it starts looking for us. Definitely not a good thing. I see. We should have known, we should have understood there's more out beyond our reality than Echelon. There's other places, and some of those places are dark and powerful and hungry, very hungry. Yeah, thank you for your report. For now, you're off active duty. I want you to report to medical for a full workup. We were lucky we found Echelon, not one of those places. This project focuses on Echelon. Anything else, your speculations, impressions, those parts of the record will be struck out. You are not to discuss other realms, not dark ones, not hungry ones. They're searching now. We'll be lucky if they don't find us. The end. So that was kind of fun to write, the underlying Lovecraftian existential terror. You go to another universe and you're poking around and you discover that there's yet another universe that isn't as nice. So
Grass isn't always greener.
Yes. Sometimes the grass is hungry.
Well, thank you very much for spending time with us, DG.
Well, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarage.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.